The Pierlight Art Center opened like a movie set, glass walls, designer suits, too many smiles. Reporters circled the entrance like sharks, flashes cut through the air. Inside, the city's elite floated from one installation to another, glasses clinking, voices polished. Grace Allen stood behind the champagne bar, her hair pulled into a neat knot, eyes focused on the tray in her hands. She'd worked weddings, galas, even political dinners, but this crowd was different. They didn't see her. They saw background. Jason Brooks, influencer, heir, professional provocateur, was already surrounded by phones. "You know what's missing from this party?" he said loudly. A viral moment. Someone laughed too hard. Grace turned when she heard her name. "Hey, Grace. Come here," Jason called. His tone wasn't a request. His camera followed her as she stepped closer. "Yes, sir," she asked quietly. He lifted a cup of matcha latte, the color almost neon under the lights. "You drink this stuff?" "I serve it, sir." "Perfect." He looked at the crowd, smirking. "Watch this. Art meets hospitality." Before she could move, he tilted the cup and poured. The green liquid ran down her apron, staining it instantly. The room froze, then erupted in laughter. Phones rose higher. "Relax," Jason said into the mic, "it's just content." Grace blinked once. Steam rose from her uniform. She set her tray on the bar, folded a napkin with slow precision, and wiped her hands. "Smile for the camera," Jason said. She looked straight at him, steady and cold. "You'll remember this night, Mr. Brooks." The laughter cracked, a few uneasy glances, a cough. Jason's grin stiffened, his live stream still running. Grace turned and walked toward the staff corridor. The echo of her steps cut through the music. Behind her, Jason muttered, "No sense of humor," and someone whispered, "That's going to trend." He smiled again for the cameras. But for the first time that night, his hand shook. The apartment was still, filled with that peculiar silence that follows public humiliation, heavy, electric, impossible to escape. Grace sat at the small kitchen table, the dim light flickering above her head. Her uniform clung to her skin, the faint green stain already drying into the fabric like a bruise that refused to fade. The phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications rolled in, videos, reposts, articles, laughing emojis. She opened TikTok once, just to see it with her own eyes. There she was, frozen mid-frame. Jason Brooks pouring matcha over her apron, the crowd erupting in laughter, the camera panning to catch every drip of green. The caption read, "When the help forgets her place." Grace watched it in silence, her expression unreadable. She didn't cry, didn't curse. She simply saved the video, forwarded it to one contact, and placed the phone face down on the table. Her husband, Michael Allen, called less than 5 minutes later. His voice came through calm and unhurried, the kind of calm that always made people uneasy. "I saw it," he said. Grace didn't reply. "You're not angry yet," he continued softly. "You're measuring." "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want respect." There was a long pause before he spoke again, quieter this time. "Then you'll decide how they pay." She ended the call and sat still for a while, watching the rain trace crooked lines across the window. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Her mind catalogued details automatically, the sound of the rain, the faint bitterness of matcha still clinging to her skin, the cold ache in her fingertips. Across the city, inside a penthouse high above Market Street, Jason Brooks replayed the same clip for the 15th time. He laughed loudly, enjoying the numbers ticking upward on his feed. 500,000 views, he said to no one in particular. That's reach. His assistant hovered nearby, uncertain. Comments are changing, Jason. People aren't laughing anymore. Jason shrugged, sipping champagne. They always change. They'll move on tomorrow. But the city didn't move on. By dawn, Grace's image, soaked, calm, and unflinching, had become a headline. The girl who didn't flinch. Service workers began posting their own stories, tagging her name, calling her one of us. The tag #Pierlight incident spread faster than Jason's apology ever could. When Grace arrived at work, her supervisor refused to meet her eyes. By noon, she received an email from HR, suspended until further notice. The phrasing was polite. The message was clear. She walked home slowly through the drizzle, her shoes squeaking against the pavement. No tears, no outburst, just the quiet certainty that something had shifted. That evening, a black sedan stopped outside their building. Michael Allen stepped out, adjusting his coat against the wind. His presence filled the small apartment when he entered, composed, controlled, carrying that faint scent of expensive cologne and power. He placed a brown folder on the table. Inside, logistics reports, supply manifests, signed contracts. Brooks Construction, he said. They rely on 7 key suppliers. 2 of them already owe me favors. Grace looked up, brow furrowed. You're not. I'm ensuring balance, he interrupted. His tone was steady, almost gentle. Cement shipments. Glass panels. Customs paperwork. Nothing violent. Just delays. She held his gaze for a long moment. You think this will fix it? I think they'll understand what it feels like to be made small, he said quietly. The fog outside thickened, wrapping the city in pale gray. Grace closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. The air smelled faintly of rain and old paper. I didn't want a war, Michael, she said finally. He smiled without warmth. Then it's a good thing I already know how to end them. Somewhere across San Francisco, the first trucks of Brooks Construction idled at the docks, engines silent, cargo locked. No one knew why. But Grace did. By Monday morning, the cracks began to show. At Brooks Construction's headquarters on Market Street, the first shipment delays arrived like quiet detonations. A cement convoy from Sacramento never reached the Bay Crown site. No explanation, no updates, just vanished paperwork and disconnected phone numbers. Jason Brooks paced across the glass office floor, phone pressed to his ear. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a growing unease. What do you mean the shipment's pending review? Pending where? By who? The man on the other end had no answers. By noon, another call came, the glass supplier. Customs inspection, they said. Routine. Maybe a week. Maybe more. Jason swore under his breath. His father, William Brooks, listened from behind the desk, expression tight. He'd built the company through deals and charm, he recognized sabotage when he saw it. Someone's squeezing us, William said finally. And it's not the market. Across the city, Michael Allen sat in his minimalist office overlooking the bay. His tone was calm as he read reports from his network of managers. Every call, every order, every invoice ran through him like pieces of an invisible chess game. Hold the shipment 2 more days, he said quietly. Then release half. Just enough to keep them nervous, not desperate. He ended the call and leaned back. Through the window, cranes loomed over the skyline like metal sentinels, frozen mid-motion. The world thought he managed logistics, only a few understood he managed leverage. At home, Grace followed the headlines. Her photo still circulated online, the girl who stood her ground. Blogs debated her tone, her stare, her silence. She ignored it all. What mattered now were the messages from strangers, waiters, janitors, receptionists, all telling their own stories of humiliation. She created a page called Quiet Shift. At first, it was small, a few reposts, a handful of anonymous testimonies. But within a week, the algorithm found fire. Every city had its own Jason Brooks. Every worker remembered the night they were made invisible. When she saw the first article titled The Quiet Shift Movement, Service Workers Speak Up, Grace almost smiled. Not from pride, but from relief. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was something larger. Meanwhile, Jason's empire buckled. Trucks idled at ports. Inspectors appeared uninvited at sites. His investors grew restless. In meetings, his charm curdled into panic. "We're being targeted," he told his board. "Someone's pulling strings." But the question none of them dared to ask was who. Michael kept his distance, watching from the shadows of corporate networks. No threats, no bullets, only delays, death by paperwork. Every move left no trace, only irritation. To the world, it looked like bad luck. At night, Grace sat beside him in silence, their apartment filled with the low hum of rain and city noise. She didn't ask what he was doing, he didn't offer explanations. They'd built a quiet understanding, she handled light, he handled shadow. Once, she looked up from her laptop and said, almost to herself, "He's probably scared now." Michael didn't look away from the window. Fear teaches faster than apology. By Friday, journalists had connected the dots. Quiet Shift and Brooks Construction appeared in the same breath. The narrative was shifting, the powerful mocked the powerless, and now the powerless had a face, a name, and a movement. William Brooks watched the news in silence. Jason stood beside him, pale, sweating, trying to explain another delay. But his father's mind was elsewhere, calculating, realizing too late that this wasn't social outrage. This was strategy. "Someone's turning the screws," he muttered. "And they know exactly where to press." Outside, the wind carried salt from the bay, rattling the glass of their corner office. By the time night fell, another truck convoy had gone missing. Grace didn't know it yet, but her quiet act of dignity had become the spark of a nationwide reckoning. And behind her calm eyes, Michael Allen, Mike Iron, had already drawn the lines for the next phase of pressure. The city slept uneasily. The storm didn't start with thunder, it started with headlines. By morning, Grace's name was everywhere. The Waitress and the mob. Quiet Shift funded by crime money? The photos were brutal, her smile beside Michael's silhouette, his eyes caught mid-blink, sharp and cold. Grace read the first article standing in her kitchen, the smell of burnt toast in the air. The journalist wrote like a surgeon, calm, factual, merciless. Every paragraph tied her husband's logistics empire to whispers of gray market dealings. Every quote twisted her silence into guilt. When Michael entered, already dressed for work, she didn't look at him. "You knew this was coming?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I knew they were digging. Into me or into you?" His eyes stayed on the window. "There's no difference anymore." By noon, Quiet Shift's inbox was a war zone, half messages of gratitude, half threats. News anchors who had praised her a week ago now questioned her integrity. Was she a symbol of justice, or the face of organized manipulation? Grace shut the laptop. They're trying to erase what this movement means. Michael poured coffee, calm as stone. Movements survive only when they have teeth. Let them bite first. Then we decide how to respond. She stared at him, hearing the steel behind the words. You talk about justice like it's business. He didn't deny it. By evening, cameras had gathered outside their building. From her balcony, Grace saw the flashing lights reflected in the bay, white, blue, white again, like the pulse of a restless city. Inside, Michael's phone buzzed non-stop. Words like containment, counter-narrative, pressure points drifted through the room. Stop managing it, she said suddenly. He turned. You think justice runs on feelings? I think it dies when you turn it into strategy. Their eyes met, hers trembling with conviction, his dark with quiet calculation. Between them, the space felt colder than the glass walls around them. Across town, William Brooks slammed his fist onto a boardroom table. Alan's behind this, he hissed. He's bleeding us while his wife plays martyr on TV. Jason tried to speak, but his father's glare cut him silent. Find who's helping them, William ordered. And end it. By nightfall, quiet shift had grown beyond control. Dozens of companies faced worker strikes, hashtags spread faster than statements could contain them. Grace's video, the one where she said the real shadows are in boardrooms, played on every screen. But for all the support flooding in, the cost was high. Grace had become a symbol, and symbols, she realized, bleed differently. She sat alone by the window, watching the rain return, softer now but steady, washing the city clean in places and dirty in others. Somewhere behind her, Michael's voice murmured into the phone, low, precise, commanding. And for the first time, Grace wondered whether the justice she'd started had already been claimed by someone far more dangerous than she ever intended. 3 days after the headlines broke, Grace Allen became a ghost. She stopped answering calls, stopped posting, stopped appearing in public. The reporters outside their building grew restless, then mocking. Where's the woman who wanted to speak for the invisible? They shouted through the rain. Inside, she moved like someone learning how to breathe again. The air felt heavier now, every headline, every whisper pressing down on her chest. Even her reflection in the mirror seemed distant, like she was watching someone else's scandal unfold. Michael had offered to handle it. His phrasing always sounded like an operation, not a comfort. But Grace said no. Because this time, silence would mean surrender, and surrender would mean that Jason Brooks, and everyone like him, had won. That night, she opened her laptop and typed a message to a journalist who had once treated her fairly. One interview. Live. No pre-screened questions. The reply came within an hour. Prime time. Tomorrow. When Michael found out, he stood in the doorway of her office, face unreadable. You're walking into fire, he said. Then let it burn, she answered. He didn't argue. He just looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that carried both pride and fear, and left without another word. The next evening, the studio lights hit her like interrogation lamps. The host smiled too brightly, sensing blood in the water. Cameras rolled, countdown began. Grace sat straight, palms resting on her knees. The room felt cold. Mrs. Allen, the host began, your movement has inspired thousands. But now, after these revelations about your husband's past, people are asking, was Quiet Shift ever really about justice, or just influence? Grace didn't blink. It was never about influence, she said. It was about power. The kind that gets abused every day in boardrooms, restaurants, and hotels. The kind people like me are supposed to serve with a smile. The host leaned forward, sensing something raw. But your husband. My husband has a shadow, she interrupted, calm but cutting. And I'm not here to erase it. I'm here to remind you that every person who has ever been humiliated under bright lights, like I was, has a right to stand up, even if the light burns. The studio fell silent. She continued, her voice low, steady. The night Jason Brooks poured that latte on me, people laughed. They thought I'd stay quiet because I was small. But I wasn't the only one in that room who was small. There are thousands like me, invisible, polite, replaceable. Quiet shift isn't mine anymore. It's theirs. And no headline can destroy what they've already found, their voice. The host tried to regain control. So you deny your husband's criminal ties? Grace smiled faintly. I don't deny anything. But maybe you should ask why the people who mocked a waitress are so afraid of her now. The clip hit the internet within minutes. By midnight, it had 10 million views. #LetItBurn trended first. Grace didn't stay to watch. She walked out of the studio, past cameras and microphones, straight into the cold night. Her breath misted in the air, but she felt lighter, as if something had shifted back into her hands. Across town, in a dim office above the docks, Michael watched her speech in silence. The men around him said nothing. On the screen, Grace spoke not like a symbol, but like a force. When the video ended, Michael exhaled slowly and muttered, almost to himself, "You did it your way." Then his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. He listened in silence, then said only one word, "When?" That night, while Grace finally slept for the first time in days, Michael's people moved through the city, calling off shipments, freezing accounts, redirecting contracts. The storm she had unleashed with words, he reinforced with precision. By morning, Jason Brooks's empire was buckling under invisible pressure. 2 major investors withdrew. The stock price crashed. Reporters spoke of structural instability, but no one could explain why. At dawn, Grace woke to find Michael standing by the window, watching the first light spill across the bay. "You won," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No. We're still in the fire." He looked at her, tired, admiring, a little afraid. "Then let's make sure we're the ones controlling where it burns." Outside, San Francisco glowed pale under the rising sun, a city washed clean, for now. But beneath the calm surface, something new had begun to take shape, not vengeance, not power, consequence. And both of them knew the storm wasn't over. It had just learned her name. The hangar stood at the edge of the bay, black against the storm. Wind howled through the rusted beams, carrying the smell of salt and oil. 3 cars waited in the rain, headlights slicing through the darkness like knives. Michael Allen stepped out first. No guards this time, no theatrics. Just him, the storm, and a single folder under his arm. Grace waited in the car, her face pale in the flickering light. Across the flooded pavement, William Brooks emerged with his son. Jason's expensive suit was soaked within seconds, his arrogance stripped to raw fear. His father walked slower, proud even now. "Alan," William said, his voice steady but hoarse. "You've made your point. The sites are frozen, our accounts under review, every contract bleeding. What do you want?" Michael opened the folder. "Simple terms." He handed it to him. William flipped through the pages, rain smearing the ink. "Jason will make a public apology to Grace Allen," Michael said. "Sincere, televised. No lawyers, no spin. Jason's jaw tightened. That's not happening. Michael's tone didn't change. Then neither is your next quarter. William read the next line aloud. 60 million to the Quiet Shift Fund. 10% of Bay Crown transferred to its trust. He looked up. You want control of our flagship project? Michael's gaze didn't waver. We want reform. You call it control if it helps you sleep. Jason laughed bitterly. You think this makes you a hero? You're just another thug in a better suit. Michael stepped closer, the rain running off his coat in streams. Maybe. But I'm the thug who remembers what you did. He nodded toward Grace's car. And she's the one who made you remember. William's voice dropped. You can crush a business, Alan, but not a name. We'll rebuild. Michael shook his head. You'll rebuild differently, or not at all. He closed the folder and handed him a pen. Sign it. Lightning split the sky. For a moment, all three men were silhouettes, one broken, one defiant, one unshaken. William hesitated, then signed. His hand trembled only once. Jason stood motionless beside him, jaw clenched, eyes full of hate he couldn't afford. When the paper was done, Michael spoke quietly. You didn't lose to me, he said. You lost to her. Grace stepped out of the car, umbrella forgotten. The rain plastered her hair to her face, but her eyes were steady. Jason looked at her like a ghost. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about consequence. He opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came. William turned away first, motioning for the cars. They drove off into the storm without another word. Michael watched until their taillights vanished, then looked at Grace. It's finished, he said. She shook her head. No. It's just cleaner now. They stood in silence, the rain softening around them. The wind carried the city's lights across the water, faint, distant, fragile. Will they keep their word? She asked. They will, he said. Because I'll be watching. She smiled faintly. Always watching, always controlling. Michael met her eyes. That's how people like them learn. For a moment, the thunder faded, and there was only the sound of rain on metal and their quiet breathing. Grace took his hand, just for a second. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something more dangerous, understanding. By morning, Jason Brooks's apology aired live. His voice broke halfway through. The city watched in silence as he said her name. Grace didn't smile. She turned off the TV, wiped the condensation from the window, and whispered. Now they see us. Outside, the storm eased. The water shimmered with the first light of dawn, pale, uncertain, like peace pretending to last. 6 months later, the storm had become history. The papers stopped printing her face, the networks found new scandals, and the city, as always, moved on. Down by the waterfront, a small cafe opened between two old warehouses. Its sign, simple and elegant, read Matt Tea. Inside, sunlight spilled across pale wood tables and the scent of jasmine and roasted matcha. Grace Allen moved behind the counter with quiet precision. No cameras now, no speeches, just the rhythm of cups, steam, and voices. Her employees, most of them former service workers, laughed softly as they worked. The rule was written on a chalkboard near the door. Here, the servers are served first. Business was steady. Tourists came for the story, locals stayed for the calm. Some recognized her, most didn't. Grace preferred it that way. She smiled when she meant it, listened more than she spoke, and every night before closing, she wiped the same spot on the counter, out of habit, not memory. Jason Brooks's apology had long faded from headlines, but people still shared the clip now and then, the one where his voice cracked mid-sentence. The Quiet Shift Fund had become a national initiative, supporting workplace rights across the coast. Grace rarely gave interviews anymore. When asked, she only said, "It was never about me." Sometimes, in the late hours, Michael would stop by. Always without warning. Always when the cafe was empty. He'd sit at the corner table, loosen his tie, and watch her work in silence. One night, as she locked up, she found him waiting by the door. "You look different here," he said. She smiled faintly. "That's because no one's watching." He nodded toward the sign above the bar. "You wrote that rule for me?" "No," she said. "For everyone who ever thought serving meant kneeling." For a moment, they stood quietly, the hum of the city muffled by the sea breeze. Michael reached into his coat and placed an envelope on the counter, no words, just a gesture. "New project," he said. "Infrastructure. Clean contracts. You'd approve." She didn't touch it. "You're still playing your games." He smiled slightly. "No. Just changing the board." As he turned to leave, Grace called after him. "Michael?" He paused. "Do you ever regret what we did?" His eyes softened, just for a moment. "Only the parts that worked too well." The door closed behind him. Grace stood still, listening to the sound of rain beginning again outside, softer this time, patient. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and whispered the same words she had said the night everything began. "You'll remember this." Outside, the bay shimmered under the streetlights, calm after the storm, but never truly still.